It's strange how silence can scream at you. That morning, the house was unnaturally quiet, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and whispers that something is wrong. I stood outside my younger brother Cody's room, hesitating before opening the door. Inside, it was empty. I froze. Cody wasn't the type to wander off. My heart started racing as my mind filled with worst-case scenarios. He was only 10, a bright, kind kid who loved animals and puzzles. Where could he have gone? I called out, "Cody." No answer. My voice cracked. The day passed in a haze. I combed through the neighborhood, checked with friends, and even called his school, but no one had seen him. By the time I finally called Mom, who was out of town for work, my voice trembled. "Mom," I began, my throat dry. "Cody's missing." The line went silent for a moment before she whispered, "Missing?" "Yeah, I'm coming home now," she said firmly, then hung up. That first night, I barely slept. The neighbor's dog barked incessantly, adding to my growing unease. I dreamed of Cody, hiding in impossible places, calling out to me. In the morning, reality hit harder. 48 hours. I read once that the first 48 hours are critical in missing persons cases. Beyond that, the chances of finding someone alive drop sharply. I sat at Cody's desk, my head in my hands, my mind looping through every terrible possibility. My hand brushed against a piece of paper. Something about it caught my eye. At the top were the words, "Save me." I stared at the page. Below the words were dots and dashes. My chest tightened as I recognized the pattern. Morse code. Cody loved secret messages. "Is this a prank?" I whispered, my voice shaky. But I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed the Morse code chart pinned above the desk and started decoding. Dash, dash, dash. My fingers trembled as I wrote down each letter. When the message came together, my stomach dropped. Just killing me. My pulse pounded in my ears as I kept going. Another line read, "Help me, Cody." "Cody?" I repeated aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's happening, Cody?" The next line stopped me cold. On top. I ran out of the room, my heart hammering. The night air in Missouri was cold and heavy as I climbed the stairs to the attic. For years, Cody had been terrified of that place, claiming it was haunted. I hadn't believed him. Now I wasn't so sure. The door to the attic was slightly ajar. I hesitated, then pushed it open. "Cody," I called out, my voice trembling. The attic was dark and stifling. Shadows danced on the walls as my flashlight flickered. The air smelled damp, almost metallic. And then I saw it, a faint shimmer in the corner, like a ripple in the air. My flashlight illuminated a figure emerging from the shadows. It wasn't Cody. "What are you?" I stammered, stepping back. The figure stepped forward, its form shifting and twisting as if it wasn't fully solid. Two glowing eyes pierced through the darkness. "I am the tank creep," it said, its voice a low, guttural rasp that seemed to vibrate in the air. "Where's my brother?" I demanded, my fear turning to desperation. The creature tilted its head. "Your brother is here, but not for long." "What do you mean?" I shouted. It didn't answer. Instead, the shadows around it seemed to thicken, creeping toward me. I stumbled back, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. "Cody," I called out, my voice cracking. Suddenly, a faint voice echoed from the darkness. "Freddy, Cody." I turned toward the sound. He was there, huddled in the corner, his face pale and tear-streaked. "Stay away from him," I shouted at the tank creep, positioning myself between it and my brother. "You cannot stop me," the creature hissed. "He belongs to the shadows now." I clenched my fists. "Not if I can help it." The creature lunged, and I barely dodged in time. The flashlight beam seemed to weaken it, making it recoil. "Cody, run!" I yelled. "No, I'm not leaving you," he cried. The next few minutes were a blur of chaos and fear. The tank creep was relentless, its movements inhuman and fluid. But the more I shone the light on it, the weaker it seemed to become. Finally, I managed to grab Cody's hand and drag him toward the attic door. The creature let out an unearthly scream, its form dissolving into the darkness. As we burst into the hallway, I slammed the door shut behind us. "Are you okay?" I asked, kneeling in front of Cody. He nodded, though his face was pale. "I thought I'd never see you again. You're safe now," I said, pulling him into a tight hug. We didn't sleep that night. Instead, we sat in the living room, wrapped in blankets, as Cody recounted his ordeal. He'd been lured to the attic by strange whispers promising a game. Once inside, the tank creep had trapped him, feeding on his fear. "I kept trying to send messages," Cody said. "I didn't know if you'd find them. I'll always find you," I promised. The next morning, I sealed the attic door and made plans to move. Missouri wasn't home anymore, but even as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the tank creep wasn't gone for good. It was out there, waiting, lurking in the shadows, biding its time, and I'd be ready. The tank creep's scream haunted me long after we left Missouri. Even though Cody and I were miles away in a rented house in a quiet suburb, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. I should have been relieved. We escaped. We survived. But the creature's words echoed in my mind. "He belongs to the shadows now." What'd it mean? A week after we moved, Cody started having nightmares. Every night, he woke up drenched in sweat, his screams tearing through the house. "Freddy," he whispered one morning, his face pale. "It's still with me." I crouched beside him. "What do you mean?" "When I close my eyes, I see it," he said, his voice trembling. "It's watching me." My stomach churned. I wanted to tell him it was just a bad dream, that he was safe now. But I couldn't lie to him. Not after what we'd been through. "We'll figure this out," I said firmly, squeezing his hand. The next day, I did what any older sibling would do. I went to the library. The dusty archives smelled of aged paper and ink. I pored over books about folklore and supernatural creatures, searching for anything resembling the tank creep. Hours passed before I found something. A single paragraph buried in a weathered journal. "The tank creep feeds on fear, drawing strength from its victim's terror. It marks its prey, binding them to the shadows forever." I sat back, the words sinking in. "Marks its prey?" I muttered under my breath. Was Cody marked? That night, I decided to confront Cody about his nightmares. "Cody," I said gently, sitting beside him on the couch. "When you said it's still watching you, what do you mean?" He hesitated, his hands twisting nervously. I feel it sometimes, in the corners of my room, in the dark." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to scare you," he admitted, tears welling in his eyes. "Cody, you can tell me anything," I said, pulling him into a hug. He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think he's coming back?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. 2 days later, someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find a woman standing on the porch. She was in her mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled into a loose braid and sharp green eyes. "Hi," she said, holding out a hand. "I'm Kata. Are you Freddie Carter?" I nodded warily. "Who is asking?" She glanced over her shoulder before leaning in. "I need to talk to you. It's about the tank creep." My heart skipped a beat. "How do you know about that?" "Can I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Over a cup of coffee," Kira explained. "I've been researching the tank creep for years," she said. "It's not just a legend. It's real." I scoffed. "Yeah, I figured that out the hard way." She shot me a sympathetic look. "It marks its victims, Freddy. Your brother isn't safe. The creature will come back for him." I clenched my fists. "How do I stop it?" Her expression darkened. "You can't destroy it, but you can weaken it. There's an old ritual, dangerous, but it might sever its connection to Cody." I leaned forward. "What kind of ritual?" Kara explained that the ritual required confronting the tank creep in its domain, an alternate plane known as the Shadow Realm. "It feeds on fear," she said. "So, to defeat it, you'll need to face your own." "Great," I muttered. No pressure. Cody sat beside me, his eyes wide. "You're not going alone," he said firmly. "No way," I shot back. "It's too dangerous." "You'll need him," Kira interjected. "The tank creep's connection to him is your key." I didn't like it, but I didn't have a choice. That night, we prepared for the ritual. Kara drew a circle of salt in the living room, surrounded by candles. She handed me a small mirror. "This will guide you to the shadow realm," she said. "But remember, it's a reflection of your fears. Stay close to each other, no matter what." Cody and I exchanged a nervous glance. "You ready?" I asked. He nodded, though his hands trembled. "As ready as I'll ever be." Kara began chanting, her voice low and melodic. The air grew heavy, and the candles flickered wildly. The world around us blurred, and suddenly, we were standing in darkness. The Shadow Realm was a twisted version of our world. Buildings loomed at odd angles, their windows glowing with eerie light. Shadows moved on their own, slithering like living creatures. "This place is wrong," Cody whispered, clutching my hand. "We'll get through it," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. A voice echoed through the darkness. "You've returned." The tank creep emerged from the shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on Cody. "You cannot escape me," it hissed. "We're not running," I shot back. The creature lunged, and the ground beneath us rippled like water. Cody screamed as the shadows wrapped around his legs, pulling him toward the creature. "Let him go," I shouted, holding up the mirror. The creature recoiled as the mirror reflected its glowing eyes. "Face your fear," it hissed, its form shifting into something else, something familiar. It became my father, who had passed away years ago. "You couldn't save me," it said, its voice dripping with malice. I froze, my heart pounding. "Freddy, don't listen to it," Cody yelled, summoning every ounce of courage. I stepped forward, the mirror trembling in my hand. "You're not real," I said through gritted teeth. The tank creep screamed, its form dissolving back into shadows. Suddenly, Cody broke free, and the two of us ran toward a faint light in the distance. "Keep going," I shouted. As we reached the light, the creature let out a final, ear-piercing wail. We woke up in the living room, gasping for air. "You did it," Kara said, a look of relief on her face. Cody hugged me tightly. "Is it gone?" "For now," Kara said, "but it'll always be out there, waiting for another victim." I nodded, determination filling me. "It won't take anyone else. Not if I can help it." Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be. Cody slept soundly for the first time in weeks, and the house felt lighter. But I knew the tank creep wasn't truly gone. It's still out there, lurking in the corners of the world, waiting for the next whisper of fear. And I'll be ready. The days after our encounter with the tank creep passed in a strange haze. Cody seemed lighter, less burdened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house still felt wrong, like the shadows were just a little darker than they should be. Kara stayed with us for a few days, insisting she monitor Cody for signs of lingering effects. Though she assured me we had severed the creature's grip, I caught her glancing nervously at corners and darkened hallways. "Do you think it's really gone?" I asked her one evening as we sat on the porch. Kara hesitated, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "These things are never truly gone. But you weaken it, Freddy. That's more than most people manage." Her words didn't comfort me. A week later, I found a letter slipped under our door. There was no name or return address, just a single line written in looping cursive. "Do you want to know the truth about the tank creep?" I showed the note to Kara, who frowned. "Someone knows what you've been through," she said. "It's not safe to ignore this." Cody peered over my shoulder. "What if they can help us?" I wasn't sure if we needed help, but my gut told me not to let this go. The note included an address, an abandoned church at the edge of town. The church was a crumbling relic, its stained glass windows cracked, and its steeple leaning precariously. Cody insisted on coming along, despite my protests. "I'm not letting you do this alone," he said firmly. Kara met us at the entrance, carrying a flashlight and a leather-bound book. "I did some digging," she explained. "The tank creep isn't just a creature. It's a curse tied to this area, a punishment for something that happened a long time ago." "What kind of punishment?" I asked. She flipped through the book. It started with a man named Elias Marrow. He was accused of practicing dark magic, and well, things didn't end well for him. Let me guess, Cody said dryly. He cursed the town? Kier nodded. His final words were a promise to return, feeding on the fears of those who condemned him. The Taint Creep is his creation, a piece of his soul. Inside the church, we found more than we bargained for. The altar was covered in strange symbols, and a thick layer of dust blanketed the pews. At the center of the room stood an old man, his eyes milky white and his hands clasped around a wooden staff. "You've seen it," he rasped, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "You've faced the Taint Creep. Who are you?" "I demand it." He chuckled darkly. "I am its herald, the last living witness to Elias Marrow's curse." Cody stepped closer, his fists clenched. "Why did you leave us that note?" "To warn you," the man said, his gaze fixed on Cody. "The Taint Creep isn't done with you, boy. It may have retreated, but it always comes back for what it's claimed. Ahi handoma spine. So, what do we do?" The old man gestured to a trapdoor hidden beneath the altar. "Below lies the source of its power. Destroy it, and you might just end the curse for good." The trapdoor led to a narrow staircase, the air growing colder with each step. Kara stayed behind to keep watch while Cody and I descended into the darkness. The basement was a labyrinth of stone walls and flickering torches. At the center of the room stood a pedestal holding a black crystal, its surface pulsating with an eerie light. "That must be it," Cody whispered. As we approached, the shadows around us began to shift. The Taint Creep's voice echoed through the chamber, low and menacing. "You dare defy me again?" The crystal flared, and the shadows coalesced into the Taint Creep's towering form. "Cody, stay back!" I shouted, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The Taint Creep laughed, a sound that reverberated through the walls. "You think you can stop me? I am fear itself." Cody surprised me by stepping forward. "You don't scare me anymore," he said, his voice steady. The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You why?" It hissed, lunging toward him. But this time, Cody didn't flinch. Instead, he grabbed my hand, and together, we held up the mirror. The Taint Creep screamed as its reflection filled the room. The shadows writhed, retreating from the light. As the Taint Creep weakened, I smashed the crystal with the flashlight. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, releasing a burst of energy that sent us sprawling. The shadows dissipated, and the chamber grew still. "Is it over?" Cody asked, his voice shaky. I helped him to his feet. "I think so." Back at the house, we found Kara waiting with a look of relief. "You did it," she said, hugging us both. Cody smiled for the first time in weeks. "I don't feel it anymore," he said. "It's gone." Though the Taint Creep was defeated, I knew our lives would never be the same. The experience had changed us, made us stronger. And while the shadows no longer haunted our home, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder every now and then, just in case. Because some fears never truly die. Weeks later, I received another note. This one scrawled in hurried handwriting. "The Taint Creep may be gone, but the curse lingers. Beware the shadows." I tucked the note into my pocket. A reminder that while our battle was over, the fight against fear would never end. But this time we were ready. Life seemed to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could get after facing a supernatural entity. Cody laughed more, Kara became a regular visitor, and I finally started to sleep for the night. But the note about the lingering curse gnawed at me. One afternoon, I visited the town library to dig into the Taint Creep's history. Kara had mentioned Elias Marrow's curse, but I needed to know more. The librarian, a sprightly older woman named Mrs. Barlow, raised an eyebrow when I asked for information about him. "Elias Marrow? Oh, he's part of the town's darker folklore," she said, leading me to a dusty section of the archives. "But be careful, young man. Some stories are best left buried." I thanked her and dove into the records. It turned out Elias had been a respected figure in the town, until strange accidents began to plague the community. Livestock died mysteriously, crops withered, and people started whispering about witchcraft. When a young girl vanished without a trace, the townsfolk turned on Elias. He was accused of summoning dark forces and sentenced to death. His final words, written in a letter before his execution, sent chills down my spine. You fear what you do not understand. One day, your descendants will pay for your ignorance. Fear will consume you, as it has consumed me. That night, I shared my findings with Cody and Kara. So the tank creep is more than just a creature, Kara mused. It's a manifestation of the fear Elias wanted to spread. Cody frowned. If we destroyed its source, why do we get that note? Shouldn't it be over? I didn't have an answer. But as the days passed, strange things began happening again. The lights in our house flickered, objects moved on their own, and Cody swore he heard whispers coming from the attic. One evening, I found him standing at the foot of the attic stairs, his face pale. I heard it again, he whispered. Kara joined us, her expression grim. We need to check it out. Reluctantly, we climbed the creaky stairs. The attic was filled with boxes and old furniture, but nothing seemed out of place. Until Cody pointed to a mirror propped against the far wall. That wasn't there before, he said. The mirror's surface was cracked, and its frame was engraved with strange symbols. As I approached, my reflection flickered, replaced by the shadowy figure of the tank creep. Did you think you could escape me? It hissed. The mirror shattered, and the tank creep emerged, its form more twisted and monstrous than before. Cody and I stumbled back as Kara raised her flashlight. We destroyed your crystal, she shouted. You're supposed to be gone. The tank creep laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You cannot destroy fear. It grows, it spreads, and it always returns. Before we could react, the tank creep vanished, leaving only the shattered mirror behind. The next morning, we decided to visit Mrs. Barlow at the library. If anyone could help us understand what was happening, it was her. When we arrived, we found her in the archives, surrounded by stacks of books. I had a feeling you'd be back, she said, her eyes twinkling. We explained what had happened, and her expression turned serious. The curse wasn't tied solely to the crystal, she said. Elias's fear infected the entire town. The tank creep is a part of this place, as much as the air you breathe. Then how do we stop it? I asked. Mrs. Barlow handed me an old map of the town. There's a place on the outskirts, an old mausoleum where Elias was buried. If the tank creep is tied to him, that might be the key to ending this once and for all. The mausoleum was a crumbling structure hidden deep in the woods. Kara insisted on coming with us, armed with a bag of supplies, including salt and candles. This is like every horror movie ever, Cody muttered as we approached the entrance. Inside, the air was heavy, and the walls were covered in the same symbols I'd seen on the mirror. At the center of the room was a stone sarcophagus, its lid carved with Elias's likeness. As we approached, the shadows in the room began to move. The tank creep appeared, its form towering and menacing. You should not have come here, it growled. Kara quickly formed a circle of salt around us, but the tank creep laughed. Your tricks cannot contain me, it said, lunging forward. Cody grabbed my arm. We need to open the sarcophagus. Together, we pushed the heavy lid aside. Inside was a skeleton clutching a book bound in black leather. The moment we touched it, the tank creep let out a deafening roar. That's its anchor, Kara shouted. This tweak? Using a torch, we set the book alight. The flames consumed it, and the tank creep howled in agony. You think this will end me? It hissed as it dissolved into smoke. Fear never dies. It only waits. The mausoleum collapsed as we fled, leaving nothing but rubble behind. Back in town, the strange occurrences stopped, and the air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Mrs. Barlow smiled when we told her what had happened. You've given the town a chance to heal, she said. Cody and I finally felt at peace, but I knew the tank creep's words would stay with me. Fear might never die, but neither does courage. Months later, I found myself standing in the woods where the mausoleum once stood. The area was quiet, the shadows still. Cody joined me, a small smile on his face. We did it, he said. Yeah, I agreed. But we'll always have to stay vigilant, because even in the brightest light, shadows can linger.